going to continue the theme from yesterday, which is on the Wannsee Conference. I'm going to talk of another civil servant, somebody who worked his way up in the administration to being in a position to have attended this meeting. I think, although as I stated yesterday, I haven't seen the film Conspiracy, but I think he actually got a bit of a bad rap in Conspiracy, because although I haven't seen the film today, I looked at the IMDb site and on Krizinger, and so what was written in Conspiracy, and there were some texts from the film there, and showing Krizinger banging on the table in support of the measures which were to be taken against the Jewish population. I don't think that actually happened, but all the same, today what I'm going to say to a large extent comes from the interrogation from Nuremberg. So he was arrested, to go at the end of the story to start off with, he was arrested on the day that at Flensburg, the British decided to arrest everybody. And so what we saw, the British sort of arresting the government of Dönitz. And then you see all these people coming out with their hands up, doing an early version of the perp walk. And very, very unusual. And just in brackets on that subject, when everybody comes out, and it was all in military uniforms except for one person, that was Albert Speer. And he did that deliberately. I think he had no Nazi Party uniform or anything like that. He had a trench coat on, even though it must have been pretty hot then. It was halfway through May, and so he was wearing his winter clothes, but he was wearing something which made him stand out as a civilian. And the person I'm talking about today, Friedrich Wilhelm Kritzinger, was also arrested at that time. He was taken in the same place as some of the high-ups were. He was taken to Ashcan in Mondorf-les-Bains, in Luxembourg, and he was interrogated. It was taken to Nuremberg. He was interrogated by Robert Kempener, no less, and it is, I don't know, it's possible that they had met each other before, but before the Nazi period. It's possible. I don't know. It's not impossible. So they might have known each other. Anyway, so you can read the interrogation report because it's on the website or the database from the website, the archive of the archive of the Institute for Contemporary History in Munich. Even though it's typewritten, at times it's a bit difficult to read. I can't read the whole thing because I think it was typewritten, I suspect, on this really thin paper, this onion paper it's called. And when you actually use this onion paper in an archive, after very quickly you're really fed up with it, particularly if half the stuff you can't understand what it's referring to because it's sort of chopping words up and things of this nature, and then you think, well, what does that mean, or what's that refer to? Anyway, so lots of information comes from there, but there is something that Kempener noted, that when he started talking about the Holocaust as such, Krizinger was visibly embarrassed. And there's one part of the interrogation protocol where he says this. Now, Krizinger worked for Hans Lammers, and they said, Hans Lammers, so he started off sort of in the easy question, sort of asking about his family and things like that. That's normal. I mean, it's normal interrogation protocol. But then he says, Hans Lammers, was he a mass murderer? And he said, no. He said, Hitler? Oh, yes. And Himmler? Yes. But Lammers? Wasn't he in the SS? Or wasn't he in SS? Then gives his rank. And oh, yeah, I suppose so. The answer comes back. Then so he sort of clicks in his mind. Anyway, I get that impression from reading the transcript. There's another point actually about this today, which I thought when I decided I was going to do this. This was some incident happened to me. In my past, I've been with a couple of women who were lawyers who worked for the government. The fact that they both had the same job. I mean, there was 16 years between the two of them, but or me being with them, that is. But in the second case, there was a woman. She was when the so-called Law and Justice Party came to power in Poland, and she was asked to sign off on a law, and she refused to do it. And she said to me, she refused to do it because the law was illegal. And she said that if you want to change the constitution, then you can change the constitution, then I'll sign it. Now, this politician who he'd worked, I think she said he was an artist or worked in an art gallery or something like that previously. He said to her that she had to understand political reality. But her response was, well, change the constitution, you've got to do that first. Now, obviously, it's much easier to say to somebody to change the constitution when you're living in a democratic, liberal society such as Poland was then, and it's much more difficult to say it in somewhere like Germany, as it was under the Nazis. But had there been people, and there were people who stood up to the to the Nazis, then things might have been different, but there weren't enough of them. Today, I found a photograph of the head of the Nazi legal, what's it called? The head of the Prussian Legal Academy, and in 1935. And what he was doing, he was hanging the paragraph sign, which looks like two S's, not an SS sign, but it's like two S's when you have a paragraph in illegal things. I don't know what the proper word is for it. And they were hanging it, so it showed what little respect that they actually had for the law. Anyway, that apart. So I'll come on to Friedrich Wilhelm Kritzinger. He was born the 24th of April, 1890, and that would make him the oldest person at the Wannsee Conference. In fact, there's about 15 years between him and some of the others. I mean, it makes him 12, hang on, Heydrich born 1904, 14 years older than Heydrich. So in a way, he comes from a different age. He was born in a hamlet called Grunifier, which is today Zielonowo in Poland. Now, 1890, this was well inside Germany. Now, Zielonowo has around 60 houses there today, and I suspect it's around the same time, in the same amount in 1890. But in 1919, there were the territorial changes, and Grunifier stayed in Germany, but it was 2 kilometers from the Polish border. And so the place where they'd done the shopping or whatever, or the farmers had gone to the market, would have been Filene, which is now Wieleń in Poland, which itself is not particularly large, but that was transferred to Poland. I have a theory that there is that people who are from the border areas are likely to be more radical in their way of thinking. That's just the theory, but anyway, I mentioned that because this may be something that comes up in other videos, maybe not so much in this one, but in other things. So his father was a Lutheran pastor, and his son remained in the church all his life. Indeed, in the interrogation by Kempfer, he asked him if he went to church. When did you go to church last? He said when he went to church last, and then he added, but there were also services in the camp as well. So he's getting his spiritual needs were being taken care of. He went to study law at Freiburg, Berlin, and Greifswald, and he started work in October 1911 at a place called Mogilno. But unfortunately, the war started, and he had to go off the war. So he was in a Prussian infantry battalion, Jäger Battalion von Neumann, 1 Schlesische Nummer 5. And so this unit was founded on 21st November 1808 during the Napoleonic Wars. And so it had a lot of history behind it. It was based in Hirschberg, which is today Jelenia Góra, in Poland. So this is about what, 300, no, I'm exaggerating a bit. Yeah, about 300 kilometers from where he lived. He was mobilized between the 1st and 4th of August. So it was immediately mobilized. 4th to 7th was transported to the west, crossed the French border on the 8th. Was in Battle of Longwy, 22nd to the 30th of August. 31st of August 1914 is in the Argonne. by the middle of September, it's unable to make the breakthrough. Argonne is, of course, the later stage of World War One, where the Americans actually came in. So by 25th of September 1914, it's in trench positions. And to be quite honest, it didn't really stay much in that area. But this unit was moved to the east. So on the 1st of August 1915, it was transferred to Galicia. And then 1917, it was moved back to the Western Front. This time it was in the Cambrai sector. That was the place where the British broke through the first time using tanks. And then it was took part in the battles for the Siegfried Line. Now, the Germans largely broke through the Italian lines in the Battle of Caporetto, which in my opinion is one of the most brilliant strategic battles in history. And having said that, by the time he got there, the Italian line completely collapsed. From there, it was sent back to Alsace, and it did take part in the Ludendorff offensives from March and April of 1918. He was injured at least twice that I know of. In fact, I found one newspaper report of his injury, and he was reported as being missing. And usually people got reported as being missing. That usually meant they were dead. But as it turned out, he had been taken prisoner by the French, and he stayed in a POW camp for the next year and a half or thereabouts. So he came back home to find his home village is on the border. There's this new state, Poland, and indeed the place he'd been working at, Mogilno, is no longer in Germany at all. It's now in Poland. But having said that, not a problem, because he went to Hirschberg, now Jelenia Góra, and he managed to continue his career there. From there, he was moved to become an assistant judge, a place called Strygau, which is today Szczegom, in Lower Silesia, not so far from actually where I sort of half live in Poland. I half live in a couple of places, one of them's near there. And so in 1923, he got married. Now, the woman he married, Walti Louise Agnes, Duchess of Schwerin, und Krosigk, was the daughter of a large landowner. And it's worth mentioning, I think now, because if I leave it too much later, I forget. She died in 1996 at the age of 99. But she, after the war, she made numerous attempts to get his pension. So this was a woman who was mega rich, or came from a mega rich family. Now, I do appreciate that these landowners usually lost their land and didn't get any compensation for it after the war. But she was somebody who was claiming, and above all, the son was claiming that, oh no, my father, he was all right, he's not responsible for this, and this was efforts to get his pension. Now, in the interview with Kempner, we've got his salary, and his salary was something like 8 times that of an average salary in Germany. So he's extremely well paid, so that the pension would have been absolutely outstanding, really. I am unaware of any interviews that she gave related to the Wannsee Conference. Let's face it, though, by 1996, the film, The Wannsee Conference, the German film was 84, I think it was. I mean, it was very well known by this time. It was the protocol was found after the Nuremberg trial, so it was really well known. Now, Krizinger, sorry to go back now to his life in the 1920s, he got various jobs in the Ministry of Justice. So his specialization was in international law, the Prussian Trade Ministry, and his work related to savings banks above all. From around 1928, he went, thank you, Jeff, he went into constitutional law, and so is highly regarded on this subject. So he's even able to advise ministers in the state. So this, I think, is to be a very important thing. Now, he's said to be apolitical. Now, when Kempner asked him, who did you vote for? He said, Deutsche National, so DNVP. And then Kempner said, but reactionaries, because they were reactionary. I mean, DNVP were not a pro Weimar Party. In fact, they entered into alliance with Hitler, which allowed the Nazis to rule. And he said this. He said, "I was always a good servant to the Republic." I think I'm quoting him directly. I haven't got it in front of me there. I should have put his interrogation in front of me. But I thought if I did that now, I should only start reading it. Anyway, so DNVP was opposed to the Weimar Republic, and it was really one of these parties which promoted the stab in the back myth, and it had anti-Semitic posters. In fact, the video I've done on Krizinger, the documentary video, I actually show one of the anti-Semitic posters. And so it was part of its platform. Hugenberg was the newspaper magnate. He was a press baron. He was one of the leaders in the DNVP. In fact, it's the DNVP largely. If there's any one party that manipulated Hitler into power, it was DNVP. It wasn't so much the Nazi Party, in my opinion. Anyway. So, things with Krizinger, he didn't resign when Hitler came to power. In fact, most people wouldn't. This is a good question to ask anybody. Would you resign in this position? Yes or no? I mean, you've got this nasty people come to power. What do you do? I mean, Hitler, you could say he didn't come to power by well, I suppose he did come to power legally. He was appointed legally, but the March 1933 elections were fraudulent. I mean, are you going to lose your job over that? Maybe you disagree with the trade unions and things of this nature. I don't know. That's rather hard. It's hard to say. But let's bear in mind that somebody in the ministries had to legalize the murders that took place, such as the murders of the Night of the Long Knives. And this was done post factum, not before it. You can't. Law cannot be applied in a backwards way. So, in 1938, Hans Lammers, he's the head of the Reich Chancellery, the office. So he asked Krizinger to join him. And now Lammers had published a number of articles on constitutional law and been a civil servant, but unlike Krizinger, he hadn't been apolitical. He'd openly opposed the Weimar Republic, and he'd been a member of the Nazi Party since February 1932. And once there was the granting of power to the Nazis, he became head of the Reich Chancellery. And so Krizinger, I think, didn't want to actually do this immediately. He went along with, he had to be asked a few times, or at least more than once anyway. It would seem that it was the Reich Justice Minister, Franz Gürtner, who pointed out that Krizinger didn't really have any choice in the matter, and that it was his duty to accept. So on the 1st of February 1938, Krizinger became the deputy of Lammers, and thus it was this job which took him to the Wannsee Conference. Now, the Reich Chancellery is in Vossstrasse, or was in Vossstrasse, it's not there any longer. I have done a video and I walk around the place and show you where it was. I mean, they've got houses there and things like that. This was in the dead zone of East Germany before the unification of Germany. In fact, I can recall you had these platforms. You can go on the platform and you look into it, and there was nothing. Well, there were things there. There were sort of tank traps and lights and things, but there wasn't any. The buildings were set back from the wall. So Lammers was the head of Abteilung B, Department B, which included the departments of Justice, Finance, and Economy. So these things were becoming more and more political, and so Krizinger himself joined the Nazi Party. He probably felt by this time that he had to, and so now the first thing he had to do, or a big thing he had to do, was related to a bishop who's called Johannes Baptista Sproul. Now, this at the time was quite a famous incident. This is something I've tried actually in my mind. I've tried to do video of, but I'm unable to put it together because there's lots of things I don't really understand. Now, this Johannes Baptist Sproul was from Rothenburg, southwest of Tübingen. On the Neckar River. Now, like many in the Catholic hierarchy, he'd welcomed the Nazis. And he welcomed the Concordat, which happened in 1933 between the National Socialist Germany and the Vatican. But soon he got upset with certain elements of Nazi policy, and he began to point this out to his congregation. He refused to vote in the 1938 general election. Of course, I mean, it was a general election only Nazis could stand, and he didn't vote in the Anschluss referendum. But this was something he said openly. If he'd done it secretly, then perhaps it wouldn't have been a problem. So the local Nazi party tried to make an example of him and arranged for a mob to attack him. But this led to counter-protests. And the Stuttgart Gestapo reported that 2,500 to 3,000 people had actually protested in favor of the bishop. So this matter went as far as the Reich Chancellery, and Krizinger had to make a decision what to do. And Krizinger did the only logical thing, the dictatorship. He referred the matter to Hitler, realizing that an attack could offend the sensibilities of the Roman Catholic Church. He thought that wasn't a good idea, so Hitler came up with a compromise. In the row, and you see these compromises happening all the time with the Nazis. When there's a bit of resistance, and particularly from one of the churches, then the Nazis were prepared to back down, but usually they came back and had another go later. There's a book called Hitler's Compromises, and this case of the Sproul, it goes into quite a lot of detail on it in that. Now, in his role at the Reich Chancellery, Krizinger participated in what I would call extreme legislation. For example, he was involved in the listing of the crimes for which offences, that's the word, for which the death sentence could be given, and a lot of these crimes were sort of imagined crimes. So this was so he introduced the civilian equivalent of special military law, and so that was designed to ensure that everyone in the military cooperated with the Nazi war effort in its conquest and plunder. And this also means that civilians found themselves in the same situation. And during the Second World War, at least 18,000 soldiers were condemned to death. And you compare that to, for example, in the United Kingdom, where it was 0, or the United States, where it was 1. Now, with the invasion of Poland, there was a wave of terror on that country. And Mogilno, the place where Krizinger had worked before World War I. Just use that as one example. It was captured on 11th of September 1939 after a 7-day battle. As soon as the Nazi forces had captured the town, then around 40 inhabitants of Mogilno were murdered by the German-speaking Nazi supporters, the Selbstschutz. And they were the ones who they picked out the people they wanted to be killed. So the youngest victim was 17, the oldest was 75. But it was people like Krizinger who made this effectively legal. Krizinger was also involved in anti-Jewish legislation. So he led, for example, the citizenship law of the 20th of November 1941 stipulated that all German Jews who emigrated lost their German nationality. That means that as German Jews were deported outside of the Reich to the occupied parts of Poland, as soon as they crossed the border, they lost their nationality, even though they were still in areas which were controlled by Nazi Germany. This allowed their property to be stolen or confiscated, if you like. Jewish people were denied the chance to give their property to other people, nor could the property of a deceased person, a person who died, say within Germany, you had a heart attack or died of old age or something like that, which still happened, then that person, if I owned something, that couldn't be inherited. It went to the state. So at this stage, a clear legal definition of who was Jewish and who wasn't, I think, by the state was required. And according to the Wannsee Protocol, this took up a large part of the Wannsee Conference. Now, Krizinger was invited there alongside a number of other people. Now, he had never taken part in anything to do with murder. He might not even have known. I mean, he did claim afterwards. I mean, he said he was disgusted by the whole thing, but he did claim that he thought that the people were genuinely being moved somewhere else. Now, that morning, on the 20th of January 1942, he went to Wannsee. They went to the conference, Am Großen Wannsee, the street, that's what the street's called, with his friend Gerhard Klopfer, who worked in the Nazi Party Chancellery. Klopfer was there as the deputy and representing Martin Bormann. So Krizinger was a deputy to Lammers. Now, the Lammers and Bormann didn't like each other. I don't think Bormann liked anybody, quite honest. But Bormann liked to actually humiliate people because they were usually because they were better educated than he was. But the deputies were friends. They got on well together, even though there's a bit of an age difference between the two of them. But the thing is this: they're friends. They go down there, and what were they talking about on the way there? That's what I want to know. They've got to have been talking about what this meeting was going to be about. I think that Gerhard Klopfer knew about the Holocaust. I think the evidence points to that. And I suspect that I don't know. I mean, if it may have had an RS, like a equivalent of top secret classification. Anyway, in any case, so at the meeting, now the thing is, we've got this protocol. The protocol was heavily redacted several times, but so Eichmann took the notes. Then he sort of wrote it up, gave it to Heydrich. Heydrich sent it back. Then he rewrote, sent it back to Heydrich, and then it was sort of sent out to everybody else. Now this is how I think when it was sent out, it was probably sent out to see if anybody disagreed with what was actually there written. So this is from the protocol. We don't really know exactly who said what, but it is likely that he brought up the question of a legal definition of who's Jewish and who isn't. Now, let's bear in mind that most of these killers, a lot of these killers, were lawyers. When I do videos, I say, right, I'm going to now try and define what this is, so then we can actually discuss it. So is the problem for them of the Mischlinge, the people who are mixed, and they couldn't decide. So if there's a Jewish father and a non-Jewish mother, what are the children? This type of thing. And so they decided to postpone that one until they had another meeting on the 6th of March 1942, and in that meeting they couldn't decide either, so then they had another meeting on 27th of October 1942, and they couldn't decide then either, so then they just decided to forget all about it. Now, at the Hans Ficker was a lawyer at the Reich Chancellery, and he said in 1948 that Krizinger had said, once he got back from the Wannsee Conference, that the meeting was and I'll say this word in German, Hornberger Schießen, Hornberger shooting. This is an expression in German which goes back to the 16th century. Don't know where it comes from, but there's a place called Hornberg, a Hornberger shooting trip or something. And it means that something's announced with a great fanfare and then nothing comes of it. Now, this is quite odd considering they were talking about murdering people. The murder of 11 million people. We know the numbers because that's clearly written in the protocol, and he must have known that. Now, did Krizinger say this to cover his own tracks? Did Ficker say it because he was hoping to cover up his role in the murders? Or did Krizinger not believe anything would come of it? Mind you, there were several people there who were murdering people and who had done it already. So I think they must have said something in the. I accept the 1984 Wannsee Conference film is it's fiction, but because we don't know what was said there, or based on fact. But there, you hear them actually boasting about the killings that have been done. For example, it's the way it starts up. Often there's some people who were taken away to be killed, and the parts of the bodies couldn't. They died of cold on the train, and then their bodies couldn't be separated from the seats, and there was damage done to the seats, and there was a question of who was going to pay for it. Now that is just the sort of thing I can imagine them talking about. I think that Krizinger, though, must have been pretty shocked at this. He did offer to resign in the late spring of 1942. Lammers rejected his request, and it would seem that Lammers suggested that he might be able to mitigate the effect and the scope of the murders. But by this time, the conflict between Lammers and Bormann was intensifying, and it was under Bormann, I think, who was demanding faster and more extreme measures. Now, the scope for the Reich Chancellery for acting against the Holocaust was extremely limited. Now, and certainly by the middle of 1942, Krizinger was fully aware of what was happening in Poland. And he sent people to the general government to investigate. They were caught. They were sent back to Berlin by the police, who tipped off Heinrich Himmler. And Himmler rang up Krizinger and warned him not to interfere. And if he does it again, he'll end up in a concentration camp. Now, this didn't stop Krizinger continuing his work, and Hitler himself actually promoted him to be Under Secretary of State, and on the 21st of November 1942 he was the Secretary of State at the Reich Chancellery. So although deputy to Lammers, he was effectively in charge, as Lammers was often with Hitler, and Hitler wasn't around in Berlin. Hitler wasn't interested in running the country. Hitler was more interested in the army, and so he was either at Volslau in Rastenburg, or he went to Vinitsa quite a lot in 1942, or he's at Berchtesgaden on holiday, which he spent a lot of his time there. So as for Berlin, he hardly ever went there at all. Indeed, I think I've forgotten how many days he was in at the Volslau, Rastenburg. So if you take the period from I think it was 23rd of June 23rd or 24th of June 1941, he got there and he left it for the last time in December 44. He spent something like 950 days. I've forgotten the exact total now, but it was something like that. But he spent a great deal of time. He's hardly ever in Berlin. In fact, he was only really in Berlin at the end. In the 1930s as well, but I don't know if that counts. Thing is, there were still laws being made making the life of Jews even more difficult, such as the accessibility to the courts, and Krizinger was responsible for that. But at the same time, this was really academic, because there was hardly anybody left then, and highly unlikely to actually use access to the court. Now, in the spring of 43, he had to go off work for 6 weeks, because he got high blood pressure and problems with his eyes. The two things are related, and so it's definitely worth considering that one. I haven't got high blood pressure, but I have this problem with one of my eyes. I've got a canal there, which apparently I was supposed to have an operation. Anyway, in parentheses. On 20th of April 1945, Hitler was 56. The Red Army got to Berlin. And the order was given to evacuate the Reich capital. Now, Krizinger was tasked with ensuring the ministry and civil servants who worked there also got out. On the 23rd of February 1945, he left Berlin for Flensburg and he joined the government of Dönitz. Or what was to become the government of Dönitz. On the 23rd of May 1945, he was arrested by the British Army, taken to Mondorf-les-Bains, and then he was interrogated. Now, Krizinger, as I said, he didn't deny the what shall I put, the illegality of the regime. He said actually to Kempner he was embarrassed to visit his father's grave after everything had happened to him. And he said to Kempner that he heard rumours for deportations from friends in town, and maybe through official channels, but we know perfectly well that many months earlier he'd known about it. Now, Kempner, for some reason, and I don't know why, after the interrogation of Krizinger, he didn't think that Krizinger would be useful in Nuremberg trials, so he didn't call him as a witness. I don't really understand why. Maybe he had too much stuff. After all, it did go on for quite some time. And anyway, so Krizinger was released in April of 1946. Now, he was arrested again in December 46. But he was ill, and he was released, but he didn't get very far. He stayed in Nuremberg, and he died in Nuremberg on the 25th of April 1947, the day after his 57th birthday. So his wife was a widow for nearly 50 years. Okay, good. So that's that. So let's have a look at that's the story told. I'll tell you what I'm going to do today, though. I'm going to change this a bit. I'm going to have a look at some of the comments, first of all, from yesterday. And then maybe because the two things are sort of linked. Now, for yesterday, I need to point out, I should have done this at the very beginning. Yesterday, I put the wrong photograph up. I mean, Neumann, I came on to do this, so I got here like 5 minutes or so before the film, and then I thought, I didn't put a picture up. Then I looked for a picture, Neumann, I put it up, and then it was the wrong Neumann. And I didn't realize, actually, I normally would look, but I thought, how many people are called Neumann? I forgot there's 9sats group commander called Neumann as well, and I put his picture up, and that was pointed out to me. Sorry, I should have said that immediately, and I forgot. So let's have a look at some of the. Philip writes this very interesting point. I've watched the dramatization of the Wannsee Conference several times. It gave me a lot to think about. On the face of it, the professional way in which the meeting was conducted is a little different to many business meetings I've attended, yet the enormity of the events they were talking about is almost beyond human understanding, and I find this difficult to reconcile. Now, yeah, so the obviously we've got these now 3 films. We've got the 84 German one, the 2022 German one, and we've got Conspiracy. But I'm sure there's some. I'm sure they're all right in their own ways. This is it is somewhat difficult. I mean, if I've been Heydrich and I've been taking a meeting, well, normally when I've taken meetings, I have taken meetings several times, and I'll start off by introducing the problem, even though everybody knows around the table what it is, and then I then will say, right, okay, so what are the things that we can actually do about it? Sometimes I've been in meetings as well, when this is just my nature, is that I can see the person who's chairing the meeting, particularly with Zoom or whatever, might be able to sort of control it so well. So I'll sometimes actually even take over. But I think this thing here about introducing the facts is quite important. Now, in a case like this, Heydrich must have had to do something like this. Look, this is the thing. We've been ordered to do this. Now we have to work out how we're going to go out about and do it. Anyway, so I did set to Philip. Well, I'll bring this up in the tonight's live chat. And anyway, so Philip writes, the delegates of the conference were operating in a dark world that needed a system of ethics of their own devising in order to function. But as I believe others have said before, their code of ethics excluded the concept of empathy, which creates a moral deficit leading to indifferent, inhuman, and brutal actions. The exclusion of empathy from all thinking and decisions at the conference is clear to see and very chilling. I couldn't agree more. The thing about that, Gustav Gilbert, the psychiatrist who was at Nuremberg, he said there was one thing they all had in common, and that was a lack of empathy. They had no feelings for other people. What's his name? The one that gives the salutes, Elon Musk. He put a tweet out about 3 weeks ago or so, saying that empathy was a weakness. I really find that very hard to believe. Anyway, good. So Carl writes. Oh, sorry. Carl writes. It was Carl that pointed out I used the wrong photograph. So I saw this one when I was in bed, and Grief Tourist also pointed out I used the wrong photograph. Now, one of the things was the building for the Wannsee Conference was changed, and if you want to see the original one, I've got a video of it on, and I stood in the street and filmed it. And so anyway, but the reason it was changed was to allow catering to take place. So if they'd been in this other one, they might have been able to get some sandwiches in, but as they went to Am Großen Wannsee, then they could have a proper cooked meal, and there was staff on hand. This building actually served itself as a sort of a hostel, not even a hostel, it's a hotel, a club for people visiting Berlin. Now, catering, writes James, would enter as a required logistic if these were day-long meetings to reduce the disruption caused by eating outside. Plus, the confidential subject matter could be discussed among the participants openly, only within the confines of the conference building itself. This is a common government meeting practice, especially when the guests travel from multiple origin points. But as you all realize, this was no government program being implemented in place. Yes, yeah, okay. I mean, that's also a really good point. Now, most of us those of us being in business, will have had this problem to deal with. Who's dealing with the catering? Now, this meeting was only 2 hours, so they didn't actually want that. But the advantage of having catering in any business environment is that it allows people to talk more freely and informally, and ideas come forward like this when they've got coffee and biscuits, or maybe not so much, maybe more something a bit more substantial, some sandwiches or whatever it is they're eating, or this is something which allows people, I think, they sort of go off into the corridors, and then they all start talking amongst themselves. Right, so David says, there a year ago, beautiful spot. It's incredibly attractive place. I think so anyway, but David agrees, there's two of us think so. It's a really nice place, Wannsee. It's very nice. And anyway, John says, was that a sneaky Nazi salute? He says that I must have done something like this, and I was giving my Elon Musk salute. Anyway, sorry, I can't read the name. Isla, I think. Isla, sorry. Right, very interesting stuff. It did embarrassingly make me chuckle when you mentioned degrees and people's mentality. At my local university, people with recent degrees and even professors believe a male can be a female 19 years on, nothing has changed. Well, I don't know about that. Okay, I'll leave that one. Heydrich, writes Stephen, wanted unanimity with all government departments for appearance's sake, if anything, yet also compromised all of them. I think will have gone through without the cooperation of these departments anyway. So, yes. Now, this is also a good point, that if you're going to do something which is illegal, and it was illegal, and these lawyers knew what they were doing was illegal. I mean, it's like the constitutional argument, which I used earlier, is that if you want to, they could have legalized killing. I think that would have been possible, but they didn't. And So the thing is like this: it's a bit like Himmler in 1943 at the Poznań Conference, Potsdam Conference, October 43. He tells them all that the Jews are being murdered, and he did that to make them all complicit. But of course, by this stage, Germany was likely to lose the war. In January 42, there was still a chance of victory. I don't think it was a very big one, but by October of 43, it was clear that the war was lost. Well, to January 42, it wasn't particularly likely. Of course, the Third Reich was occupied much more land then. Okay, and we have here another one. It says, so I don't know who it's from because I haven't got the name up, from Jay. The German 1983 version of the Wannsee Conference was as realistic as it can be. The later one, starring Branner and Eichmann, Tucci, was preposterous. Right. Well, I can't say because I haven't seen it. All I've seen is a few shorts videos on YouTube, so I don't really know. Okay, I'll come on to today's. Oh, a lot here. Very good. So I'm going to move my camera along. It's not my camera; it's my telephone. And anyway, okay. So hello to Craig, Mike, Philip, John in Tacoma, Washington, and Groucho Marx, no less. Oh, right. I'm glad you're still around, Groucho. And Groucho's asked you to actually press the like button. If you could do, I'd be grateful. Hello, Annie, and sorry, okay. Oh, Jeff writes, and thanks very much, Jeff. That's very much appreciated, the donation. I recall Kritzinger was portrayed as one of the few who was somewhat oppositional to Heydrich in the Wannsee movie Conspiracy. Right. Okay. Sorry. Well, all I read what it said on the internet movie, the IMDb. So I don't know, but yes, if it may well have been that. I mean, it is. In one state, at one point, it may have taken courage to actually stand up and say things, but on the other hand, the lawyers want things to be defined properly. Okay, so I'm going through, and so we'll see that Annie likes as a Michael Jackson fan and likes Smooth Criminal, and right. Right, John mentions that Lammers looked like Marty Feldman. Yeah, I was wondering. Yeah, so I was trying to think who is it he looks like. But yes, okay, good. And hello, Box. With Langer and Schoenegarth present, there's near zero chance that before, during, and after the meet, the hands-on experience with actions were not discussed off the record. Yeah. Langer. And Schoenegarth in the Baltic states and Belarus, they'd murdered, I don't know, thousands, tens of thousands of people by this time, and yeah, it is hard. I mean, in the German version of Wannsee Conference, in the film, this actually comes up that they actually say that. I think I can't remember who it was who said it around the table, but they did actually say it, and it strikes me that if you got any meeting, if I'm chairing a meeting, I will say something to somebody directly. Okay, just a minute, you've done this. Can you explain it? Or something like that. Or how do you think this is going to work from your experience? Something along those lines. But this is a really good point. Okay. John Wright is reading a biography of Karl Brandt that covers this. I don't know that one. And Groucho writes, I've read William Asher's book, which again I don't know what that is, to be honest. And sorry, I'm going through the comments. John makes the point that Berlin was surprisingly anti-Nazi. Yeah, Berlin actually sort of prides itself that it was red, whilst Munich was brown. Yeah. Although having said that, though, I mean, there was quite a lot of Nazis in Berlin as well. Another place which we often said to be red was Hamburg. Philip writes, recently read in Susan Neiman's book, Learning from the Germans, that of 15 official present, 8 had a PhD. Martin Bormann perhaps didn't like that much. Yes, yeah. Anyway, so Groucho does make the point that it wasn't a Nazi salute. I think he's referring there to Elon's antics. And yeah, and John also makes the point that the booze was flowing freely. It might have been, but it was a bit early. A number of these Nazis were alcoholics. I mean, you see this happening. I mean, I suppose people are going on killing people, and they might have that effect on them. Alcohol was a major problem. So yeah, this could have been. And bear in mind that it's something. A meeting like this, it was. Who was it? They said, "Oh, maybe we'll have a drink or 2 or 3, a cognac or 2 or 3." I think it was Heydrich who said that. Hans says, reckon they were all terrified of Heydrich. Well, they might have been. Let's face it. I mean, given the records of some of these people. Hans also writes, they were not all equals. Yes, many were officials, but the dynamics were with the SS. I think Einsatzgruppen representative was there only to represent reality, not only to, was there to represent reality, but also to intimidate. I never thought of that one. So the point of having these people, because in 2 cases, I mean, they shouldn't, their bosses should have been there, logically, but they weren't. So if you've got somebody in there that's already killed tens of thousands of people, and you've got the lawyers who've never seen a dead person before in their lives, and probably don't know which end of a gun the rounds come out of. Yeah, I'd never thought of that, but that's a really good point. It's they're there to intimidate. I haven't written it yet. So I mean, 3 years ago I said the next one I was going to do was Schoengart, but I still haven't got round to that. I will do eventually, I suppose. Right. Okay. Thanks very much for watching. It was about an hour nearly. Well, I'm exaggerating. 53 minutes. Tomorrow I'm going to do one on the governor of Radom. In the general government. His name was Karl Lasch, and he took corruption to new heights, let's say. And he was also the governor later from Radom. He was mate of Hans Franks, and he was then placed in charge of Galicia. So thanks very much for being with you today. Lots of interesting points there coming forward, and as it's getting dark and I haven't got a light, so I'll have to finish now. So for the moment from me, there will be a live chat tomorrow. I won't put up a video. There'll be a live chat on Wednesday and Thursday. On Friday there's a video, and on Saturday there'll be a short video. I think it won't be a long one. I'm traveling on Friday. I've got to get up really early, and then I've got a longish journey at both ends. So. Thanks very much for watching. Thanks for being with me, and bye for now. So, bye.